Ready to rock.
All right. So back with the sportsense podcast. Super excited about this one. We have Paul Howard on today. Paul, how are you doing today?
Good, man. Good to see you. I'm excited to chat today. It's super mild outside, so it feels like biking weather. But yeah, man, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, really appreciate this. You've done, lots of podcasting on your own with donuts and bikes. Obviously, you're super integrated into the bike industry. You just have so much going on. And I wanted to kick things off. We were just talking about this before the podcast. This year is the 20th anniversary of ZEP Coaching. And so could
Yeah.
you talk to me a little bit more about ZEP Coaching and where that came from and what was your vision for it like when you started out? And then where has it gotten to now?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I don't know. The dream was always to sort of do this for a living. And when you're suddenly I was saying this to someone on the chairlift the other day. They were like, "How long have you lived in Whistler?" And I was like, "Oh, like just over 20 years." And it kind of just hit me like it doesn't feel that long ago that I was saying like, "Oh, I've been here for 5 seasons, 6 seasons," and now all of a sudden I'm like, over 20 years, and I was like, "That's crazy," and it's slightly depressing because if I've been here for 20 years, that means I'm not 20 anymore. That means I'm 40 something. So there's that personal like, oh shit, 20 years. That means I'm kind of old. But no, it's amazing. I mean, it's surpassed all expectations. For people that don't know me, like I started teaching mountain biking mostly in the States, in North Carolina in the late 90s. And I did that for a number of years. And when I finished university, I studied in London. I'm originally from the UK. And my goal was to come out and see if I could kind of take that summer experience teaching mountain biking and turn it into a career, basically. So I started teaching snowboarding, and then the plan was fairly logical. Like, if I can teach snowboarding in the winter, teach mountain biking in the summer, that's my sort of quote unquote career, year round career. And I worked for a number of bike shops and businesses for a number of years. But for me, I was always aspiring to like running my own school. And we kind of had this running joke as kids that I would start as a ZEP mountain bike school, and not ever taking it seriously. Most of my childhood, I thought I was going to be a doctor or a scientist. So it was kind of weird when eventually, I think it was 2006 when I officially started ZEP. And yeah, so sort of fast forward now to 2026 and 20 years later, it's it's crazy. We started off with me just running basically private lessons in Whistler Valley, um, to now having 12, 13 coaches every season. A lot of our coaches have been with us for years and years, a bunch of them 10 years or more. And so the growth of ZEP is really based around a small family business, and it's me and my wife Shannon. She's the sort of brains behind the operation for a lot of it. Like, it wouldn't be here today without her. And then Ross, who's just a legend. I have a lot to thank Ross for, and all the senior coaches, Jake and Dave and Chuck, and we've got Megan that's doing the general manager role now, and the whole team. It's kind of crazy to go from, I think the first season I ran like a handful of private lessons, and I think the total revenue in the first year was like $5,000. And it was part-time then. I had a job working for Cross Country Connections, so running their rental fleet, doing all the mechanics, doing all the guiding, doing all the lessons. So I was working for them and trying to set up ZEP at the same time. And we did that for a couple of years. And then it kind of reached that critical point I think a lot of small business owners get to. It's like they've got a job to pay the bills, but they're trying to start this business. And at some point, you've got to sort of do one or the other. You can't keep doing both. So I think it was like 3 years in, we went full time into ZEP. And then a year or two later, Shannon started working for ZEP. And that's really when it kicked off, when both of us were working for the business and trying to grow it. And then Ross came in. Ross has been with us since the early days. And And here we are, 20 years later, still riding bikes, still coaching, and and having a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
it's really cool, really
Yeah.
cool.
So you're from Brighton, England. That's where you
Yeah,
grew up. And
yeah.
you talked a bit about like that's where you started mountain biking as well. And I just want you to paint me a picture a little bit of what did it look like mountain biking in Brighton, England back when you lived there when you were younger.
Um, I mean, it could not be more different. I mean, it's basically a different sport. Like, it's funny to say like I grew up mountain biking because when I tell my kids that, it they can't even visualize sort of what I was doing. But it's a hardtail mountain bike, obviously, so no suspension, no disc brakes, and it was essentially me and my mates, Dan and Adam, most of the time. It was the three of us just riding around on the South Downs, which is like, if you haven't been to England, it's sort of that classic sort of green rolling hills, and the South Downs are very chalky, and there's no purpose-built mountain bike trails, so it's all just public bridle paths, walking paths basically, and tracks through farms. So mountain biking to us back then was um, riding up grassy hills and then pedaling as fast as you can back down the other side. So, and then like playing chicken with who was going to slow down first before the gate at the bottom of the field. That was almost as exciting as it got. And then there was a wood called Stanmer Park, and then basically people there went and walked dogs, and we would just mess around in the trails there, try and build some trails. Eventually, it got to a point where Alfriston Forest, which was a little drive away, the longest downhill in Alfriston was like under a minute. But it did start. That's when mountain bike trails started to evolve in terms of people going out and actually building mountain bike trails. And that's where we really got into mountain biking. But for most of my childhood, it was like mountain biking was an escape to get out of the house and get outside and go play with your mates. And it was a lot of sort of fitness based stuff. Like our rides was like, how long could we ride along the South Downs before we got too tired and have to come back home? And it was all just up and down grassy, chalky hills, and um, it was the adventure side of it. And in terms of the skill building side of it, like we did a lot of that, like jumping, doing drops, doing jumps, trying to learn wheelies, or endos or nose pivots, or even a bit of trials riding, like hopping up picnic tables and stuff. My friend Dan was really good at it. He could hop on the back wheel forever and hop onto picnic tables and wheelie one-handed. And my mate Dan, like he's still my best mate today, and he was a bit of a natural talent on a bike, and he always inspired me and pushed me because he would learn a trick like 6 months before I would. He was just a sort of a bit more of a natural athlete, um, and that took me through my biking through most of my younger years because I was just trying to keep up with Dan, and Ross has taken on that role now. Like I'm just trying to keep up with Ross, which sometimes I succeed, but most of the time I don't. But yeah, and so a lot of that skill building for us was actually more urban based, like because there weren't drops or jumps unless we went into town and found walls or stairs or banks to sort of jump over or drop off or hop up. Um, so so a lot of that kind of the sort of exciting side of mountain biking, which we definitely love. Like I grew up cross country racing a little bit, just sort of amateur level. But it would drive me nuts because I would go to like a mountain bike race and we would literally race around a grassy field with the odd route or two. And I was like, this isn't mountain biking. Because for me, I was always inspired by Dirt Magazine, Steve Pete, Rob Warner back in the day, and that generation, Will Longdon and Chain Spotting and the original Dirt movie with Jason McCroy. And we just lapped up anything that was like wheelies, jumps, skids, um, all the sort of the evolution or the like birth of downhill, basically.
Yeah.
Uh, I had a poster of John Tomac on my wall because he was like I think he was like world XC champion at the time, but he was also world downhill champion. So for me, anything that was like gravity fed, skills based, jumping, like that's really
Yeah.
what we clung on to. But yeah, it was a different sport, and we were doing all of this on basically road bikes with knobbly tires. And eventually we got to a point where I saved up my paper round money and got a Pace RC35 suspension fork, which had 1.5 inches of travel. But it was beautiful. Like the fork legs were this beautiful carbon fiber, and then the brace, the brake brace, the arch was like this gorgeous sort of machine billet aluminium. Like it was a beautiful piece of kit. It didn't work for shit. It was rubbish. But it looked really cool, and it gave you some kind of cushioning that when you sort of hucked to flat off some stairs, you were like, wow, I've got suspension. Just a different world, man, different world. And I actually bought an old Marin a few years ago off eBay, like a 1994 Marin, partly for my own nostalgia, but because I wanted my kids to see, like, this is the bike I grew up on. And they make so much fun out of my old bike. They're like, how do you even ride that? And I like last summer, I was like bouncing around the yard in it and jumping off the wall in the backyard and off the steps. And they're like, don't do that. It's going to break. Like, yeah, different world, different bikes, but
Yeah. Well,
it didn't change how much fun we were having.
I can relate to your story of riding urban and just getting out with your mates and enjoying. I really got into mountain biking when I was like, would have been early 2000s. I was like, 10 plus, got just a standard, pretty like, I can't even remember the name of the bike, but it's front suspension, hardtail. And I grew up in Northern Ontario, so Sault Ste. Marie, and there are cross country mountain bike trails, but they weren't close enough to where I lived, so that we would go out close by where I lived, which is all urban. And there's this one huge street called Great Northern Avenue in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Great Northern Avenue goes all the way down. It's part of the highway actually, but it just heads into the city. And there was all these industrial sort of shops on Great Northern Ave if you started at this one point. But in behind, there was all of these urban kind of like parking lots and then transitions, drops, and like little features that people had built all the way down this road. And
Yeah.
so we would just, and it's like a slight downhill, like not crazy. So you're pretty much flat, but then you're getting like these drops as you go.
Yeah.
And that's what we would do. We'd go out and we'd hit that line, or we'd like try to find new ways to hit the line. And it would take a while to get all the way down it. It was more cross country riding, but we would just be like, really feature based too. So
Mm.
we would go after that drop, or like, oh, we're going to hit this jump today, or we're going to hit this thing. And then there was even this park nearby where we would go to. And I remember we were just kind of, completely uneducated on like what we should be doing. Drops to flat was a big thing. We're like, oh, we got to try to hit, we got the suspension now. Let's try to hit these like 6 or 8 foot drops just straight to flat because the suspension
Yeah.
can handle it. And it was,
Yeah.
us just being a little naive and young and a little bit crazy when we were younger. But so this just kind of makes you think, thinking back to Brighton and England in your early days, and maybe even now, do you have a favorite trail from back then, or one from that's more modern in Brighton, England?
No, I don't really have a favorite trail. I have my favorite people. Like
Yeah.
I really miss my buddies that I grew up with, and we have tried to go riding a few times. I went riding in Bristol near where they live now a few years ago. So I miss the people, but the trails are just so different. Like nostalgically, there was this downhill track I mentioned before in Alfriston Forest, and that was the first time we rode like berms, off camber into berms and like a proper downhill track, I guess, like for back in the day. And there were even a couple of really sketchy like jumps on it that weren't very big, but were just built so poorly. They were like super sketchy and difficult. And I've got a bunch of pictures on that, and we filmed on that. And that place always has sort of a fond place in my heart. But I always link English mountain biking too to like what was the best cake shop. So like for us, a big part of our riding was where are we going to go for tea and cake afterwards? So there was always a link like, well, if we're going to go there, where's the nearest cake shop? Um, so there was a good little cafe near that place that we'd get tea and cake. And same in Stamford Park, there was this little tea shop at the bottom of the park. So we'd get super wet and cold and muddy, and then when we were fed up, we would go and warm up, get a cup of tea and some cake, and then ride home. But yeah, different different generation, different culture, and but it's all just riding bikes, right? And I remember going like the school fields a lot was where we mostly did any jumping. It was like trying to jump from bank to bank, or jump over tables, or jump over kids. You'd wrangle like younger kids that were messing around in the fields, and you'd line them up on the school playground because there was this bank next to the playground, and we would see how many kids we could jump over.
Yeah.
So yeah, different times, but I mean, here now, like people often ask me, like, "What's your favorite trail here?" And then it kind of depends on my mood, really. Like sometimes,
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I'm really more into pedaling, and it's going to be probably a trail up behind my house. I really like Hawaii, but other times I'm really into the bike park. So, or it's
Yeah.
North Carolina. I really miss North Carolina and the trails there.
Yeah. Well, you also have this interesting sort of parallel, and you even talked about this a little bit already, where you have your genetics degree, and but you can already hear you analyzing like this is what you did when you were younger, and this is how it influenced what you're doing now. And so this root cause analysis, and with the genetics degree, it's like that's pure root cause. That's like one of the things that one of the actual isolated factors that make you the way you are. And
Yeah.
so if you look back like what you used to do as a kid when you were riding and now with ZEP coaching and GSMBC and everything you're doing, are there any things that stand out, like those root causes that stand out from things you used to do then that are sticking around now or make you the way you are now?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've always loved science. I was good at it at school. It was easy for me, and I found it really interesting. And so I think because of that, I've always had kind of an analyst. I've always been a thinker. I've always had an analytical mind. Um, and like my family are doctors. My mum used to teach medical students. Like the sort of science ethos is I guess that was in our house growing up. So I've always had that kind of learning style and very analytical. And I think on the other side is like I was always sporty enough to be good at sport, but I was never a natural athlete. So I was kind of good enough to participate, but I was never the best. But I did play tennis when I was younger to a pretty decent level, and that was interesting for me because I spent more time playing tennis than most other kids. Like I went to a tennis club regularly at weekends, and when we would play tennis at school or any kind of tennis competitions, which wasn't very often, it wasn't a particularly popular sport in schools, but whenever we did, it was very clear to me that, wow, I'm one of the best tennis players. So I was like, I'm not the best at PE and I'm not the best at sport, but if I actually spend time on it, I can be really good at sport. Um, and I think that's really helped me as a coach because, I was saying earlier about Dan, like he seemed to learn things when we were kids, like way quicker and easier than me. And I'm like, what the hell, man? Like you took you 2 days to learn to wheelie. It took me like 4 months after school every day trying to learn how to wheelie. And so I think not being naturally gifted in that way, it forced me to really think about, well, what am I doing? What are the building blocks here? What's the technique to learn it? So I think not naturally being good forced me to analyze it and think about it and kind of problem solve. And obviously that sets me up to then be a better coach. And I still find that today. Like it's the same in my snowboarding. I'm okay at snowboarding, but the only reason I've got to the level I am in my snowboarding is a bunch of help from my friends and mentors, but just years and years of sort of analyzing it and trying to understand it and accelerate my sort of self-coaching essentially. And so yeah, I think that's a pattern I've had since I was a kid, and it definitely leads me to where I've got to today with ZEP and when I started PMBI and now GSMBC, that whole system. Like I've had a lot of people that have read the PMBI reference guide or the GSMBC one now that we do. I've worked on that system for essentially 20 years, and it was built around the same principles I learned through science, and especially through my degree. I had to write a number of papers at university in my genetics degree. I did a big thesis in collaboration with London Zoo for over a year on the territorial and mating behaviors of captive sunbirds. It's got nothing to do with mountain biking. But, I did a lot of primate behavior and ecology at university and genetics and statistics. It was a pretty incredible degree. But the whole time I was learning systems, and I was learning how to research and then how to collect that knowledge and then present that knowledge in a way that someone could just pick up a book and read it and understand what you're talking about. I mean, we literally spent 3 years learning that structure of learn information, collect information, organize information, and then present it to someone in a way that they can digest it fairly quickly. And so even though I'm not teaching science or or sitting in a lab figuring out different genetics, um, I learned so much from my degree that essentially went straight into my mountain bike coaching career, because as soon as I started coaching in North Carolina, um, I rocked up and they basically had a mountain bike school. We had like 30 bikes, a bunch of trails, and they said, go teach mountain biking. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I've grown up mountain biking.
Yeah.
I'm not dumb. Like, I can figure this out. But I was like, well, is anyone going to train us? Or do you have anything in terms of like a lesson plan, or like, do you have anything to offer us? They were like, no, just go figure it out. And in a way, that was the best thing, because I'd studied a bit of psychology at A level at school, and just having that analytical mind, it was pretty quick for me to come out with like, well, here's a bit of a system for us to teach, so we're not just making stuff up, and we're all kind of on the same page with how we teach these kids.
Yeah.
Because we would have rotating instructors in North Carolina, so two of you would teach at any one point, and then two of you might be on a trip, or two of you might have a lesson off. So because we were rotating, like, we needed a consistent system so that if the kids went from one coach to the other, we were teaching the same skills and we were teaching in the same way. So I quickly wrote a system for that. And then things like a training wheel, like explain, demo, practice, feedback, like there's a structure that I learned from psychology and different learning styles. And then we broke it down into some basic skills. Like, there's a really old skills pyramid behind me. This is like an old article from, I think, 2010 or something like this. This is an old picture from one of the early ZEP days. But I basically came out with the first skills pyramid for mountain biking. And this was before I even did any snowboard courses. And
What year was this?
this was 99.
Damn. All right.
99, 2000. And the end of that summer, we had like some basic teaching theory of like a lesson plan, like we warm up, bike check, safety talk, bit of an assessment. And then we start with teaching gears, teaching brakes so they could go and stop. And then once they could go and stop on some flat terrain, we would teach them some like body position stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of those fundamentals are what went into PMBI, and obviously
Right.
now GSMBC. So it's crazy. Right? Even the braking lesson that we have was born from those first couple of seasons teaching mountain biking. And obviously we've refined it and improved it over the years, but the foundation of it was developed in North Carolina. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to think of where it is today. But yeah, learning those systems and those structures is essentially in my genetics degree, like really
Yeah.
helped me build the foundations of the system that I've basically been polishing and refining and working on for the last 20 years.
Well, there's a ton of things in there that I want to touch on. Like, I want to come back to the sunbirds, and I want to talk about a number of other things. But just to like, one of the things you finished off with there, you're talking about braking, and already talked a little bit about these bikes that were worse back in the, like, 90s and early 2000s, and then also bikes now. And Is there any merit to learning how to brake on a non-disc brake bike or something with, worse brakes like actual just the wire brakes?
1,000%. Because, well, for one reason, when the brakes don't work, you have to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Which is maybe like a separate skill. That's not
Yeah,
necessarily that's not necessarily something you would teach someone now, but it does teach you about breaking points, because if you know the brakes are or aren't going to work a certain way, you have to be a lot more purposeful about when and how much you're going to brake.
right.
Picking your braking zone earlier so you're not braking late, because if you brake late, the brake won't work and you won't slow down in time. So you get very good at your sort of when to brake. Um, and then feel for traction. Like, the other thing with those bikes back in the day is like the brakes didn't work great, but in a way that was good because the tires didn't have much grip. So if you had put a modern brake on an old tire, it, with no suspension and crappy tires, like, brakes only work relative to the grip the tire has. Um, and which is why your body position is so important when you're braking, because if you're not in the right place on the bike, the tire doesn't have enough weight, it doesn't have enough grip on it, the brake doesn't work, so you just
Yeah.
end up skidding. um, but yeah, I think you learn so much from riding those old bikes, even with, without suspension. You learn how to be light and smooth and fluid on a bike. I remember PT talking about that for years. Like, he grew up racing and raced at a really high level on rigid bikes. And then started racing downhill on rigid bikes. I think one of his first bikes was like a hardtail Kona, and he was racing UK nationals on it.
Right.
This is like way back.
Yeah.
Um, Aging myself again, unfortunately. But yeah, learning on that kind of equipment, it it really builds a lot of awareness and skill set. And even today, like, it's pretty rare for me to get punctures or break anything on my bike. And some people just think I don't really ride very much. I ride on my own quite a lot, or I ride with my kids, and my kids are pretty fast. They're pretty good. Um, and it's largely just from the way I ride. I ride light. I don't abuse my bike, and a lot of that is because I grew up riding on hardtails. But it also hurts me the other way. Like, I I have a hard time riding blind trails, because there were so many times growing up I'd be riding trails I didn't know, and they were built poorly. Um, and I would end up like over the handlebars because they suddenly put
PTSD. Yeah, this
yeah, a
PTSD of not
blind drop
knowing it.
in, or like you'd do a drop and there'd be like a rock in the landing because no one moved it properly. And I had that so many times growing up, and now I really struggle riding blind trails or a trail I don't know super well. And then I do struggle still with like trusting the bike. Like, these modern bikes are so stable, they're so capable. But sometimes I catch myself and I'm like, I'm riding this bike like it's a 2001 bike, or it's a 1998 bike. Like, I need to ride this bike like it's a 2026 bike and just let the brakes off and trust that the bike will get me. So there's things, in a way, I think my background has helped me with my coaching and with my riding. But sometimes in my riding, I think I still forget that I'm riding a 2026 bike, and there's still some of those old habits that maybe don't help me. Like, sometimes I wish I kind of learned to ride in the last 10 years, and I don't have some of that baggage from the late 90s. But
Yeah,
hey,
there's
that's just me making excuses.
I feel it's definitely you want to make sure that people are still developing the skills that they need in order to get uh, down a trail or ride a trail most effectively. And then the other sort of direction, and I think the hot topic at the moment is e-bikes and people looking at e-bikes and uh, really it's springtime right now and people are maybe looking at like getting something new and you look at the pink bike front page and it's just e-bike stuff all the way down.
Yeah.
And how has the philosophy, of coaching, like clearly there's a bit of a shift here. You're riding heavier bikes, e-bikes, with some different stuff going on with the geometry. And then you've really taken it, upon yourself to build curriculum around how to coach with e-bikes and how to incorporate them into groups, which is another interesting thing because not everyone in a group is going to have an e-bike.
Hmm.
So if you could speak a little bit about that and the stuff that you have developed, and like what do you see going forward for coaching with e-bikes and riding with e-bikes?
Yeah, I mean, I love e-bikes. I think they're awesome. Um, I was a little skeptical at first, I think a lot of people were, but something I've really learned over the years is like anytime new stuff comes out, the classic reaction for a lot of people is resistance because they're scared of something new. I don't get why humans keep doing this. We just keep doing it. Like, when are we going to learn? Like, just relax, just be open minded to stuff. Because most of the time when this stuff comes out, it's because somebody passionate somewhere thinks, I can make a better product. And you can be cynical about it and think, well, it's just companies trying to make more money. But in the mountain bike industry, yeah, there's some big companies that make a ton of money. But generally speaking, and I would sort of come paste this to a lot of other industries as well. It's like a lot of it starts with just passionate people going, I wonder how I can make this better. And, 29ers were a good example. The first 29er I rode was horrible. The geometry sucked. The tires sucked. But you couldn't help but notice how much smoother it was than the tires rolling over roots. And especially for me, being like 6'2", the size thing, the clearance thing was never an issue for me. So for me, I was like 6'2", man, if they can figure out better tires and figure out the geometry, like these things are going to be sick. And sure enough, a few years later, like I've had a 29er trail bike now forever, and I'll never go to a smaller wheel. It's the same thing with suspension. I remember when disc brakes came out, and people were like, "You don't need disc brakes. That's too much power." Because we
Yeah.
went from calipers to V brakes, and V brakes was such a big upgrade to the rubbish we had before. People, you don't need disc brakes. I mean, imagine saying that now. That's crazy. And I think e-bikes are just falling into the same trap. People are resistant to them, but most people that are resistant to them haven't ridden them enough or haven't ridden them at all
Yeah.
and haven't looked at the full industry and zooming out and the full scope of what they can do. And most products are designed to make the experience better. Whether you're a new person to the sport or an existing person to the sport, um, if you're a new person to the sport, e-bikes make it more accessible. They make it more comfortable. It's going to lower barriers to trying the sport out. How is that a bad thing? More riders, more trail funding, um, stronger economical situations in the industry or for brands, small or big. Like, it's all positive, right?
Yeah.
And then for existing riders, and specifically for coaches, game changer. Like for us as coaches, if we're riding a lot, we're coaching 4 or 5 days a week, and e-bikes a
Right.
no-brainer because you're safer, you're not burning out as much, you have more energy to maybe go for a personal ride after a day of coaching. A massive tool. And if you're not sort of using your own physical engine as much, you obviously have more bandwidth mentally and physically for your students. So it's kind of a win-win all around, and you don't lose fitness. Like there's a bunch of studies that have come out that e-bikes are better for cardio training because you get to stay in zone 2 more of the time.
Right.
And especially where we live, Whistler, Squamish, Pemberton, like you're forced to go into zone 3 a lot of the time. And
Yeah.
that's great for leg strength, but it's not great for sort of endurance cardio training. So, if you're coaching a lot of the time on the e-bike, you're in zone 2 a lot of the time. You're getting that quality cardio training, and then you've got energy to then go for like a leg burner strength, shred ride after work. So I think there's always misperceptions with new equipment. Always. A lot of those kind of get demystified. The fact that they're easier and you're not working hard, I think that's silly. I think anyone riding the bike is going to work as hard as they want. Like I've had different e-bikes over the years, and I still end up coming home as tired as I was from my regular bike. It's not like I go for a ride on my e-bike and then never raise my heart rate. I push myself as much as I probably would on my regular bike. I just end up going 3 times as fast. So
Yeah.
people have heard
You
those
need to
kind
pay
of
more.
arguments before, but for coaching, I think they're brilliant. And that's partly why I developed the curriculum, our e-bike module with GSMBC, because there's so many coaches starting to coach on them. And if you're not on them, you might have clients on them, or half your clients are on them, half your clients aren't on them. They come in and they're here to stay. So it just made sense to sort of give coaches a bit of that education and give them some tips on how to adapt their lessons for class 1 e-bikes. That's the key thing. Is like there are those different classifications, so we do have to be very clear that really when we talk about mountain bike coaching, it's generally those, pedal assist, no throttle, limited to like 32 kph. It's basically a mountain bike with a bit of a motor on it. It's none of those, eBay throttle kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
that's where the term e-bike can sort of get misconstrued, or it can ruffle some feathers. But if we just remind ourselves, we're talking about a proper mountain bike with a little bit of a motor on it. It's just pedal assist. Really, it's just the same as a regular mountain
Yeah.
bike. But you got more
And
juice in your legs.
there's this like non-trivial sort of aha moment unlock with an e-bike where there's amazing trails all like Sea to Sky is like where you and I are from or live right now. And there's these areas where you would only be able to do like a lap or two because they are fairly steep and it is a lot of climbing.
Mm.
But as soon as you have an e-bike, that it's you're doubling or tripling the number of laps that you could do, and that's a
Yeah.
crazy unlock.
Well, and not just that, but like there's a trail in Whistler that I would ride maybe once a year or twice a year. It's a pretty big climb. And I didn't always have the time or the fitness to enjoy the climb. It's the sort of climb I could do any day, but it's the sort of climb that, like, unless you're in shape, it's just a bit of a sufferfest. Um, but then when you do it on the e-bike, it's still a tiring climb.
Yeah,
You still get in a workout, but the downhill is just so much more fun because I've got more energy and I'm less
yeah,
spent, and my back isn't as stiff. My whatever it is, I'm pumping. And I'm getting way more enjoyment out of the downhills, and that's something I didn't really think about before I had an e-bike, was how it would impact the whole ride and not just sort of the quote unquote the climby bits.
yeah,
Um, and it's the same for clients. Like what I'm finding now too is clients that are on e-bikes, they are transitioning to more of a skill-based approach to, how do I improve my riding? Like the e-bike's helping me manage my knee injury, or it's helping me manage my fitness. And now I've got some bandwidth, some energy to ride downhill more of the time, or am riding downhill more of the time because I'm doing 3 laps instead of 1 lap. And I've got more energy on the downhill. So it's kind of cool how it's impacting things in that way. And I also think they're really impacting the social makeup of rides. Like I've been on a few rides myself where I know I wouldn't have gone on that ride if I didn't have the e-bike, because
yeah,
they're way fitter than me. And either I would feel that sort of perceived pressure that sometimes we're silly and we think, well, I don't want people to wait for me, even though most of the time that's not actually reality. Just to remind any listeners out there, don't worry about that. Just go on a group ride. But
yeah,
that still happens to me sometimes, and I don't want to hold people back, or I don't want to try and keep up and just be completely buggered too, because then
yeah,
I'm not enjoying the ride, right? And that's probably for me the more likely thing, is I would try and keep up and then I'm not having fun. And I've been on a bunch of rides where I've had the e-bike and it's been an equalizer in the fitness levels, and then it's just really opened up more of those kind of social connections, social opportunities. Because I'm not saying no to rides, I'm saying yes, because um, I've got an e-bike, but I haven't really had one for the last couple of years. My wife's had one. I've barely ridden it. So
yeah.
I've had a couple of years now where I've maybe ridden an e-bike a handful of times in the last couple of years.
Do you think so? Question on e-bikes there. It's like, do you think we're 10 years out from every single bike basically, or like everyone in a ride group being like, "Oh, you don't have a battery in your bike? You're crazy."
Yeah. I would say like never say never. Because I've been wrong before, and that's kind of my point before, is like trying to be more open-minded about innovation, because I think the barrier is the cost and the weight. If they can keep making them cheaper and a little bit lighter so that the bike is easier for more people to handle, um, and the weight has pros and cons. There's some things that it helps with. It helps in certain areas for braking. It helps with stability over choppy terrain. E-bikes handle better in some ways, but then they're more challenging in other ways, especially if you like getting the tires off the ground.
Yeah,
Um, Without a jump, they can be better to jump, but sometimes if you want a bunny hop, or lift a rear wheel or manual. I like the manual. Um, that, there's pros and cons to it, right? So I feel like if you can make them cheaper and you keep making them lighter, I don't know why we wouldn't have 90% of people on e-bikes, because it's just a better bike. Like if you
Yeah,
have your bike now that has some free power and is pretty much the same weight and a similar cost, why wouldn't you?
that would be
You
so
know,
cool. Like I
do you
would,
know
I
what I
would.
mean? And I think that's where we're going to try and get to, is like lower costs, lighter e-bike, free. And in a way, it's like, well, now I'm just getting free power in my regular mountain bike.
Yeah, essentially something that's indistinguishable from a mountain bike these days, and then the ability to just kind of switch on the battery and just, that's basically every bike that goes out there.
Yeah. If it's
And
3 pounds heavier and gives you a bit of juice for the climbs and it's kind of a similar price, like I'd be surprised if not 90% or more riders didn't have one.
What'd be really cool too, and this just popped into my head, was like, imagine like an automatic tire inflator with a battery. Like, so if you got a flat or something like that, it's like, oh, that's too bad. And then you just like flip the switch and the battery like inflates the tire. We have those like tiny little
Yeah.
inflators now, but anyway, that's just, I
Russ
digress.
has got one of those. He's got that
Yeah,
little,
little guys. Yeah.
they're expensive, but like, he whipped it out last summer at the top of a racetrack and blew up one of the kids' tires. Like, "Meep." I was like, whoa,
Pretty
that's
sweet.
pretty fly. That's next level, coach mechanics right there.
Well, so, and you're talking about e-bikes, and the same topic keeps coming up almost, where it's like ride groups and community. And we're talking about like how much the people around you that are biking influence what you're doing on the bike. So from, when you were younger with Dan, this guy is like able to like hop on one back wheel, but he's figured it out. He's part of your community, and then you're sort of figuring this out. And then, now looking at what you've done with this, all these different channels of, ZEP mountain bike and GSMBC, even the community online. And how important has community been for you in pushing forward mountain biking?
I think it's everything, because you don't really get anywhere in life, I think, without your family or your friends. And that's certainly been the case in my life. And, the team is really what makes it. And the cool thing I've seen with ZEP, for example, is we started kids programs just before COVID, because for years we were kind of adult specific, and then before COVID we just started some kids programs, and partly because me and Shannon had our own kids as well, um, so it just seemed like a logical time, and I spent most of my sort of former years teaching kids mountain biking, so I really wanted to get back to that, because that's actually the thing I love the most, and I'm probably the best at, is teaching kids. Um, and the community you get from running those, because we run kids programs from 6 to basically 16, 17, 18, all the way from just like little shredders having fun 2 days a week to basically a BC Cup and a national racing program. So we have this kind of, essentially there's a pathway if you wanted to, through that, to get coaching from age 6 to 18, from just having fun on a bike all the way to like trying to race BC Cups and Canada Cups. Through running those programs, you really get far more integrated into the community, because our adult programs in the earlier days were more destination based. And that's partly where coaching was in Whistler at the time. It was a lot of people coming to Whistler for a weekend camp, a 1 week camp. And those are the kind of the programs we run. And we still offer those, but they're a much smaller part of ZEP now. And most of the adult programs we run now are for Sea to Sky locals, so like weekly clinics or weekend camps for locals. And integrating into the community, you see the impact that mountain bike coaching has. And it's got nothing to do with skills. Like, obviously, everyone gets better on a bike. But what's really cool is seeing these kids grow in confidence, grow in athleticism, grow in fitness. And it's all just mountain biking as a tool to do that. And we've seen the same in our ladies' nights, our dad's programs, our cornering clinics, like seeing the community and how mountain bike lessons has really helped bring as a level of sort of mental health, physical health, um, to these families. It's awesome. And then And then that's kind of compounded tenfold when we talk about my background with instructor training and now GSMBC with coach education. Like the last 20 years, I've been writing curriculum to train instructors and to create certifications for mountain bike instructors and coaches. And the impact of that is staggering because when I started it all, it was like I started ZEP and I just wanted to teach mountain biking for a career. And it was with the instructor training, I wanted to try and raise the standards for instructor certifications because I did a bunch in the UK, did one in Canada, and they were all really sad. And I knew what we'd developed in North Carolina was already better than what I had seen. And I hadn't really at that point sort of polished any of it up and packaged it into one thing. So when I started the first PMBI courses, it was really the goal to just raise the standards of mountain bike instructor training so that anyone out there teaching mountain biking was teaching skills and not just constantly teaching maneuvers, because mountain bike coaching used to be very terrain and maneuver based, like how to ride routes and how to ride drops. And there was a lot of nonsense from road riding too, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, even major publications were like, oh, when you go downhill, lean your weight back and be careful of using the front brake. It's dangerous. Like all this stuff today that we know is nonsense, but it was around for a long time. And that was really why I started ZEP. And at the time, PMBI was to like get rid of a lot of these myths and this nonsense and actually train people to not just teach mountain biking properly, but understand the skills and the techniques and what they actually are. Like I remember a YouTube channel, a really big mountain bike YouTube channel. I'll name any names, but it's still out there today. And a pro rider, this is only a few years ago, heading down a steep slope saying, oh, you get on steep terrain, you want to like just be careful of the front brake, lean your weight back. And he was literally riding down the slope centered using his front brake, but saying these kind of old school myths.
Oh man.
And that stuff still exists a little bit today, but generally I started ZEP to really help the industry get into a more professional place. And it's crazy to look at it today. Like the amount of companies and bike parks that we've directly or indirectly trained over the last 20 years. And to see that influence on the culture of mountain bike coaching today and to see the average messaging going out there, you just go onto Instagram. There's a ton of videos of people saying how to become friends with your front brake and how to be centered when you ride downhill. And that didn't exist. And a big part of that is because of PMBI and because of what we've been doing with instructor training for the last however long. And beyond that, not just how we're teaching the sport, but seeing communities grow through coaching programs. I don't want it to be like tooting our own horn, but you can't help sometimes. Like there's this one location in Brisbane, Gap Creek. And when we started running courses there, you barely saw any mountain bikers. You could run a course there for 3 days and maybe see one other mountain biker. Now you go back there and you run a course and there's 2 car parks now instead of one small one. They got toilets at the bottom and there's mountain bikers everywhere. And a large part of that was from training instructors that could then go and build high school programs and coaching programs in the local community. And obviously it's not just instructor training. It's a combination of like better bikes, better funding for trails. But the instructor training and building those coaching communities, building those coaching services through mountain bike clubs or bike parks. It's been amazing to see how we've helped communities grow like that, but also helped individuals start businesses. There's companies out there today that are basically all over North America, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, that didn't exist and wouldn't exist without some kind of formalized certification process so that they could go to the insurance company and show that they had some kind of training. And without that insurance, they can't get, into a place where they can operate commercially. And seeing people's lives change through quitting their jobs, starting a mountain bike school or a coaching company or it's been pretty cool to see, and even people's careers, seeing people come in, and just being a mountain bike coach wasn't a thing that didn't exist.
Yeah.
That as a job or a career choice or a part-time summer job, that didn't really exist. Whereas today we kind of take it for granted that if you're a 17-year-old and you want a summer job this year, you could get a summer job teaching mountain biking. That's cool.
Yeah.
That didn't used to exist. So um, it is funny going back to the start of the podcast, and we were talking about 20 years, but when you sort of zoom out and you look back on it, and the goal was to improve mountain bike coaching and improve the training standards for certifications, sure, but then you sort of zoom out and you look at like the wider influence that's had on the industry and
Yeah.
had on individuals and had on communities. It's really humbling, and to your point, it's that only happened because of the community,
Yeah.
because of the people we've worked with.
And to jump in to talk about like community a little bit and what you've done, and with all of the certification, and like now most modernly with GSMBC, it's really important to standardize what people are doing and then standardize the experience, and also push things forward scientifically based, but then also in a way that you're working on these skills. You're a practitioner in this sort of thing. D- What's been really cool to see you guys do as well is you talk about ZEP and GSMBC, and you all these things that you do all these in-person trainings that then influence that market in those local regions. And so that's really cool. One, super cool. Two is you've also brought a lot of the stuff online. And so you've taken this whole community aspect and made it more accessible to people who maybe aren't in Whistler, who maybe aren't in, the specific mountain bike hubs where they need to be. And so I've really, seen this sort of blow up with having the community online, with GSMBC and all of the resources there. And that's really been a huge, I think, improvement to one, get people more interested in mountain biking. So they see these things, they get a little taste of like what it would really look like. But also like not everybody needs to do a 3-day course over a weekend or whatever it is. It's like kind of getting a little taste of like how to do one specific thing or whatever. And so a great job with the resources, and then bringing the communities online. That's kind of the next sort of logical step there. And
Yeah,
I want to shift things um into more of like actual sort of the tactics of how you sort of come up with this stuff and whatever. One really interesting thing that stuck out to me with your level 3 and level 4 certifications through GSMBC, and it's really human centric. And so I wanted to ask, how do you grade empathy?
yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing I want to just quickly say on that community front was, when we started GSMBC last year, I'd spent years basically building a team of coaches and instructor trainers, and that core group of people for me was like my family in the industry, and that was sort of my inner circle, and the community for basically mountain bike instructor training, and that's the most important piece. And so to have all that team together with GSMBC and the people we've worked with for, you know, 10, 15 plus years, um, training instructors everywhere, like that community is our biggest asset. And to have that group of people with us today in GSMBC it is the most meaningful thing for us. And I think it's the biggest asset that GSMBC has, is that 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 group of people and their expertise and
Mhm.
their experience. And it's very humbling and it's incredible. And to that point of like moving that online, that for us, it was a chance to like learn from what we've done in the past and then raise the bar again. And what can we do better? How can we reach more people? Because for us, a big part of being global was we wanted to connect communities together and offer opportunities to communities that aren't where we're based, which is Whistler. Um, so yeah, traveling to Australia and America and New Zealand and all these different locations throughout the US, it's it's been something I've done for a really long time. And I think back to your point of community, like that's the thing I'm the most proud of, is all the people we've met and all those connections and those relationships and building that community. That it's kind of crazy. And to now expand that to online, um, it's even better. We're doing webinars every month and community forums people can jump in on, and it's all about the people. And so it feels great just to keep the people and bring more people in.
How do you grade empathy?
Oh, good question. Well, a big part for, to link to sort of people and communities, like the human centric approach in GSMBC is to remind coaches of really there's a holistic skill set that makes you a good coach. And it starts with social skills. Because you could be a great writer and even a great teacher, but if you can't connect with the humans in front of you and show them a fun time and relate to them, then we're still missing a really important part of what makes a mountain bike lesson fun and engaging and valuable, that people actually want to pay for it. And so, within that social skills kind of framework, empathy is one of the key pillars, I guess. And empathy is really understanding the world through someone else's eyes and sort of walking around the world in their shoes. Because we have sympathy and empathy, right? Sympathy is where we understand why they might feel happy or sad. But empathy is like, well, now I actually feel happy or sad because I'm seeing the world through their lens, through their eyes, and I'm actually feeling the same things they're feeling, or I can understand how they would feel in that way. So empathy is so important for coaching, because if you can understand what it's like to be the student, chances are you're going to adjust your coaching accordingly. Your presentation style, you might be a little quieter, or you might be a bit louder and a bit more energetic. You might talk about sports, you might talk about science, you might not talk about politics, you might talk about politics. Empathy really helps you see who's in front of you and then adjust your teaching for them. Easier terrain, hard terrain, quick progression, gradual progression. It all boils back to the customer experience. But then obviously the skills coaching, how much we can improve. So in terms of marking empathy, it's really a part of assessing social skills as a whole. Positive attitude, presentable, patient, and then things like sympathy, empathy, and understanding values such as equity versus equality. And when we're watching coaches present lessons, practice coach, and run some sessions, we're looking primarily at the connection piece. And one outcome we look for is student engagement. So if the students are smiling, they're relaxed, they're asking questions, that's often a key marker for these social skills. If a student is asking questions and they're being answered thoughtfully and respectfully, that's another key marker as well. So listening skills is a big part of these social skills, because a lot of the time when we coach, we're thinking of something, we're seeing something, and then we're presenting it, right? So we're almost on like output and transmitting, but a good coach should be sort of receiving and input and listening. Um, so really, in terms of assessing empathy, we have a few checklists in terms of the social skills set, and then we kind of assess those through what we call our skill development model, which is PECM, which is processing, emerging, consistent, autonomous, and mastery. And most of the coaching levels, we're looking for consistent or higher. So are they showing empathy, sympathy? Are they patient? Are they positive? Most of the time. And if they are, they're probably in that consistent zone. If they're doing it some of the time, they're probably in that emerging phase, so that they're starting to show show the social skills.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how we look at it, a little bit more holistic, and then we use that Peckham skill development model to basically help quantify, are they showing this behavior some of the time, most of the time, or all of the time, kind of emerging, consistent, or autonomous.
Yeah. So yeah, a really interesting concept is, it's like a lot of people would look at mountain bike skills training or like being a coach and go, it's the skills, and very specifically mountain bike skills, right? When, for experienced coaches, being able to grade that very, it's a subjective, it's a mindset thing, but obviously that's extremely important. And like shifting the thoughts over a little bit to like, biomechanics and like the actual like skills pieces. And we've had a bit of a historical conversation today. And is there any bad habits from, let's call it, the early 2000s that you still see today when you're coaching people?
Yeah, 100%. Because the bad habits will always be there because the brain tells you to do dumb stuff.
Yeah.
If you lean down a slope, it will tell you to lean away from the slope. So you'll
Right.
always see skiers leaning back. You'll always see mountain bikers leaning back. It's not natural to think, I'm going to lean down this slope, right? I'm going to stay centered on my bike and weight the front wheel evenly to the back wheel. Like they want to get defensive. The brain detects risk, and the outcome of that is usually the emotion of fear. And then that's where we get into a defensive biomechanical position. Doesn't matter what sport you do. And every sport will have its bad habits because the brain is always looking to keep you safe and to find the easiest solution. And sometimes the easiest solution is not the most efficient or the effective from a biomechanical standpoint. Like if you're playing golf, the easiest thing to do is just to sort of keep your eye on the ball and give it a good whack. But we all know, anyone that's played golf, it takes years to sort of master the swing. And there's a lot of very intricate biomechanics behind a really good golf swing. But unless we get that coaching, the brain's just going to say, stand next to the ball and give it a whack.
Yeah.
So you're going to develop all of these bad habits, like just swinging with the shoulders and not swinging with the hips, which is super common in golf. And golf coaching's been around forever, and it's at a really high level. So for me, we'll always see that in students. What we don't want to see is that in coaches. And so luckily now we don't really see that. We don't see coaches teaching any of that old school stuff. We see coaches understanding that I need to teach my student to be friends with the front brake and to teach them how to stand up and be centered on the bike when they're coasting or riding downhill. That's going to be some of the foundational stuff that I teach my students. Teach them how to brake without skidding, all of this kind of stuff. So for me, I think we'll always see it in riders. We see it less so these days because the bikes are better and the education is better around the sport. Like we don't have magazine articles, generally speaking. They still pop up occasionally. And generally, we have fewer YouTube nonsense. There's still a lot of nonsense on YouTube. So for any listeners, beware, because there's still some ridiculous stuff out there from big names. But it's way better than it ever has been. Generally, stuff on YouTube is like, stay centered, use both brakes. I'm just using those two examples because they're super common, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same in magazine articles. Generally, those articles are getting better. I mean, one good example was my pet peeve with magazine articles for years was like how to drop.
Okay.
And there'd be some biomechanical suggestions in there about lifting the front wheel. And a lot of the time it was like manual off the drop, which is not what most riders need to do most of the time. There are certain times you can manual off a drop, but it's very unique and specific and for a more advanced rider. But it would always bug me because the reality is in today's world is drop-offs, the technique depends on the speed, size, and shape of the drop. And it's not a one size fits all, this is how you do a drop-off. So that would always drive me nuts. And gradually, even just in the last few years, I'm starting to see some articles and some videos on YouTube that actually finally understand that like there isn't A, B, and C for every drop off. It's just not the way it is. It's really a ratio of press, absorb, leading or poking the bike ahead. And how much you do those three movements really depends on, like I said, the speed, size, and shape of the drop. So adjusting techniques based on the scenario. And I think nuances is one of my favorite words. Ross uses that word quite a bit, but mountain biking is a complex sport and it can be distilled into some simple skills. And that's our role as a coach, is sort of take all this information, simplify it for the student. But that doesn't mean we get rid of nuances and when and how much and adjustments for specific or different scenarios. And I think a lot of coaches and companies went through that phase of like, we're trying to make it really simple and this is how you do X. This is how you corner. No, that's just nonsense, right? Like,
Yeah.
because if you change the shape, the size, the speed of the corner, chances are different techniques are going to come in and all the different ratios are going to change. How much you angulate the bike underneath you, how much you rotate, when or if you pump, it all changes based on the corner. Even your body position can change from like being centered to slightly forward to slightly back. That's going to change on the corners. So I think coaching is in a really good place right now where most coaches understand how to distill things and simplify it for most riders most of the time. But they also understand the nuances and when do I need to adjust or change it based on the specific trail or the specific drop or corner in front of
Yeah.
me
And
and coach those adjustments, coach those variables. We've got to coach variables as much as we have to coach kind of rules in a way.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
And this is like a system that's always updating too. Like when we talk about biomechanics and mountain biking, it's like there's constantly updates, and we're at an exciting time in the sport of mountain biking because we have people riding all different ways, being successful in different ways. And so you're coming up with these sort of, this is what we've seen in the industry. This is what's working right now. Biomechanically, this is what we want to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And that's really the core of my role is this technical development of how we ride bikes and then how we coach those skills, those biomechanics. That's something I've been deeply passionate about since, watching PD and looking at magazine photos of him in the late 90s. Because he was always really good because he was technically a really strong rider, but he was tall and gangly. So when he did a movement on the bike, whether it's rotation or getting lower or whatever it is, or just his general body position overall, it was really easy to analyze. And that is my strength is understanding the physics a little bit from my science background and understanding the biomechanics of this movement based sport largely. And that's really what's driven ZEP for all of these years and obviously now GSMBC and everything we did with instructor training before that. Like the reference guide that we have has a whole section on riding skills and essentially the physics and the biomechanics behind how we ride a bike. And
Yeah.
in an ideal world, the only thing I would work on would be that. Because that's
Yeah.
really what I'm most passionate about. That and teaching skills. And it would just be those things. I'll give you an example. A common one in mountain biking these days is people get low. They're better at staying centered, which is great. We generally don't have riders sort of riding downhill and moving back. But we get riders that they don't ever get into a proper neutral position, which is tall, relaxed. Essentially, the muscles are switched off. The bones are stacked. It's an incredibly strong, efficient position. But it's not locked. It's not stiff. So there's a difference between tall and stiff. And generally, and this is where the nuances come in, is people think to get more stable, I'll get low. But if you get low, you bend your knees, especially in your legs. You're going to bend your knee, your hip, your ankle. And now you're supporting your weight through your muscles. And those muscles get tired. And stability doesn't just rely on your center of mass relative to your bike. It relies on fatigue. So you can be lower and then be like, well, technically I'm more stable because my center of mass is lower. Yeah, but if your legs are tired, you've got no strength of support in your leg. And so you can't resist forces. And stability is generally defined as can you resist a force?
Right.
And if you can't resist a force, squashing up into your legs, you're going to collapse in the berms. You're going to sink down. You're going to sink back. So trying to get riders to understand what are the factors that impact stability. Your position is one of them, but your strength is also, and fatigue is another one. And so what we need to do as we're riding and being mobile is adjusting our position so we're getting the best of both worlds, getting low when we need to be low. So we're closer to the bike and our center of mass is lower, but then not staying low because otherwise we'll just get too tired, in which case we'll be weak and we will lose our stability anyway. So a good rider should constantly be adjusting their position down the trail. And typically we go from like neutral to classically we've taught ready position, but we're working on a bit of a new system now to update that. And essentially neutral is our tool position. And then we move from there because we're trying to get rid of these riders and these coaches that teach this. Coaches tend to take variables, simplify them too much, especially level 1 and 2 coaches, is they want to make it easy to repeat so that every time they teach the lesson, it's quality and they say the same thing. They want, and the students often want that. The students often want, tell me what to do and I'll do that thing the whole way down the trail. And so that sort of preferences with the student and the coach often creates too much simplicity. We lose the nuances, and now the student is better than what maybe they were coming into the lesson, but they're lacking the nuances that actually allows them to continue to progress. So this is a common one. We see people like teaching neutral and ready, but the student likes the feeling of riding low, and they've heard that like if you're lower, you're more stable. But now you get riders that just stay low the whole time, and they're
Yeah.
buggered halfway down. And the reality is sometimes being taller and using your bones is actually stronger and more stable than being low. Like a high speed berm, if it's fairly smooth and the grip is good, there's no sort of roots or bumps on it, you can just stay tall, lean in, brace against those forces with your bones, and it's way less effort. So
Yeah.
not only is it stronger, it's also more efficient.
Yeah.
So this kind of stuff is what's going through my head probably most evenings is
Yeah.
how do I take like biomechanics, what's happening in the industry, what's happening with coaches, what's happening with riders, and how can we just make sure we're doing the best job possible of training coaches to make it simple but not lose the nuances.
Yeah, and clearly there's a ton of skill that comes with communicating these nuances. And so I've actually experienced it firsthand with you when you were out, and I was basically I should have had my legs straighter while I was riding, and I had them like more. I was lower. I was basically riding low everywhere. And the communication, the point that you actually gave me was you were like, it looks like you're doing a lot with your legs, but you don't need to with what the trail is like giving you, right? So I'm not like my legs should be straighter, and then when I actually hit something that I should be absorbing, that's when my legs are coming up. And
Yes.
so you like I remember you said that, and that was a huge unlock for me where I was like, whoa. It was like one of those moments where I was sitting there and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. Or another thing that I often like, you can communicate these things, but then for myself at least, and this is a big reason why we started Sports Sense, was like, one of the easiest ways to or to communicate something to someone along with that coaching piece is to then show them a video of them doing it. And so a lot of times I think I'm doing one thing, I get it explained to me, and I go, "Oh, I am doing that." And then somebody shows me a video, and it's like not even close. I'm like, "Oh, well, I get it now. I have no one to blame except for myself. I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to change that thing." Um, how much are you using video right now in your coaching, and how are you using it?
Well, I think I mean, we started using like video analysis on phones pretty much since the phones came out. In terms of like iPhones, and we're consistently like coaching with an iPhone. Um, because it's just the instant feedback, and most learners, even if they're like a bit more cognitive and analytical, or even if they're a bit more of a doer and they just kind of want to ride and feel it, doesn't really matter your learning style. The cool thing with visual learning is most learning styles will always love to see a picture or a video. um, so regardless of kind of your student type, your learner type, um, if we can teach with visuals, it's going to be good. I love the saying, "A picture says 1,000 words." We all know that, but sometimes we forget it. And as coaches, I was even reminding some coaches the other day to like use demos more because they're talking too much. Uh, there's a reason why that saying exists. It literally says 1,000 words. So when you're giving someone feedback, you can try and explain it, or you can just say, "Hey, look at this. You see your legs? All right, they're too bent. Let's try and keep a bit straighter. You'll feel um, less fatigue, and you'll actually carry better speed through that berm. Here, let me give you a demo." Right. So the picture does a lot of the talking for you. So in a way of like conveying the information, it simplifies the talking, which usually minimizes confusion and doubt. Doubt is a part of a student's process when they don't understand it or they don't believe it. It's sometimes both of those things going together, and a video actually ticks the box of both. Like I might not show the video, but I can explain it really clearly, but they might doubt what I'm saying because they don't believe that their legs were that bent.
Yeah.
I'll show them. So now I've ticked both those boxes. I've given them clear instruction and I've removed the doubt. Because trust is a big part of that sort of student coach relationship, right?
Yeah.
And partly the doubt is not because they're cynical and they don't believe the weird guy teaching them or girl teaching them. It's partly self-awareness. Like a lot of riders, recreational riders, some degree of athleticism, but they're not pro athletes. So their self-awareness of, are they getting lower? Are they pedaling in a cadence too fast or too slow? Are they skidding the back wheel? Sometimes they think they're not doing it or they're not doing it that much. And it's not their fault. They just don't have that feel and that body awareness. So a video is great for that split. You see that? Oh, I am skidding the rear wheel. I didn't realize that. Well, I told you were. Right.
Yeah.
So it's really good for those things. And I think with the SportSense app too, it just takes that video analysis to like new levels, right? Because we can zoom in, we can slow it down, we can draw on it, we can even pull up a video of like me doing the berm and then them doing the berm. So we can do a bit of compare and contrast, which for coaches is fantastic for developing their eye for feedback and their eye for analysis. Fantastic tool for coaches. But for students, you know, that's a great thing for them. Like it's nice to sort of, you might, a classic one I'm always teaching is like trying to get people to ride in a taller neutral position. So it's actually neutral. They're actually switching off their muscles and actually stacking bones, dropping the heels and actually being efficient. And they think they're tall, but as soon as you show them
Yeah.
and then you show a video of like you doing it and then like, oh, wow, like you're really like your legs are way straighter than mine and you're way taller. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, let's try it again. You were kind of a 7 out of 10. Let's see if we can get to a 9 out of 10 in terms of height. So it's just like e-bikes. It's just like the evolution of bikes. It makes the experience better. If for me, I feel like the older I get and the more I do this, it's almost like the more childlike I become. Any new toy, I'm like, yeah, this keeps it fun. This keeps it fresh. This
Yeah.
makes it better. I don't get that. There's that sort of perception that old people get stuck in their ways, because they do. Any of us can probably go talk to our parents or our grandparents to find evidence of that, right? And in some ways, I do get stuck in my ways, but I almost feel like for me personally, as a coach going through life, like I'm actively trying to not get stuck in my ways. Like every year, I'm like, what can I learn new this year? Or what can I do something different this year? And apart from it potentially, helping and making things better, for me, that's the secret to just keeping it fresh. How do you do the same job for 20 years and still love it? Sweet, there's this new app from SportSense. Well, this is giving me a whole new element to my coaching. Fantastic. New
Yeah.
bikes. Oh, new tires. Oh, this is fun. It just keeps it all fresh.
There's an interesting point that you sort of touched on there, and it spans across all coaching. Giving the athlete the information that they need to be responsible for their own decisions. I think that video really bridges that gap in a lot of ways where, you can tell them something and you can give them all of this information, you can communicate it, and you can say like, okay, here's all your info, and they interpret it in the way that they want to. Video is just another tool to get, or another piece of information to give them that then allows them to be responsible for what they want to do. And this comes in at a number of different levels. So one, it would be like, safety, which is like if you have like a decent rider, a medium, intermediate sort of rider, I feel like it's very relevant there, even beginners, where you're giving them the information to then be like, make the safe decision, do the use the right technique that's going to be like the safest way, and also you're probably going to have the most fun. And then if you go to the like race level, you go as a coach, you might be like, I don't want to be responsible. You want to be responsible for like the info and stuff coming in, but you don't want to be responsible for the decision that the rider makes within the race. It's kind of like hand off as much information as you can, and now it's their responsibility to then perform on the race side. So there's levels of that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting as to how much a coach takes on, and like obviously you want people to be responsible for what they're
Yeah.
doing.
Well, I mean, I mean, to that point of a race coach, like any race coach worth their salt, you'll have a connection with your athletes to the point where there's mutual trust.
Hmm.
And and really that collaboration is and that connection is key. And so when you share information like a video, the one thing SportsSense is really good for is that compare and contrast. Like if you're at the races, like we have a race team in ZEP, and I know the coaches use it, and I've used it with my daughter too. It's like line choice is great for it. Like film one rider doing the corner or a section, and then film the other rider, and you can compare it on the same screen. And I think the key for the race coach is to decide when and how much the information the athlete needs.
Yeah,
Um, but if we go down that road and show that information to the athlete, it's knowing that the athlete is going to find that valuable and it's not going to overload it, and it's knowing that the athlete trusts the coach. Um, and as long as that trust and that connection is there, it's a fantastic tool. And it's like any tool. There's pros and cons, and you've got to learn when and how much to use it. If you use it at the wrong time, too early in someone's learning, it can be frustrating because it will just highlight all the things that they haven't succeeded on yet. Um, if you use it too late, we lose opportunities for more efficient skill development. On a race weekend, if you use it too close to the race run, you might get your athlete reinvesting and overanalyzing when really they should just be focusing on executing. But I think it's a very powerful tool. And I think for World Cup athletes and race teams right now, if you're not using video analysis and you're not training your riders to use video analysis as a development tool during the off season, so that during race season it's not a new element, it's just a part of their coaching, it's a part of the athlete coach relationship, you're off the mark a long way. and
yeah,
and partly what I'm seeing in race teams is some of the race teams have technical coaches
yeah,
like Ollie with Axis Nuke Proof that um understand the technique at a high enough level, and then so the coaching through the video analysis can be not just tactical, it can also be technical. But there's still some coaches at a high level that could improve their understanding of technique at that level, especially when it comes to like juniors versus elites and women versus men. There's a whole world of biomechanical nuances, even at that level of World Cup racing, that I think World Cup coaches can still build their knowledge and understanding on. Because at
yeah.
that level too, it's not about right or wrong. That's the misconception I still think is around the World Cup level behind skills coaching. Is like a skills coach at that level is going to be more about showing the options
Yeah, it's kind of like
and
volume
the pros
knobs
and
is the
cons.
analogy I've heard too. It's like volume
Yeah,
knobs,
it's
like turn up, turn down specific things. Yeah,
Yeah, and like for this berm, you're doing this, but you could try this. And I know you can do that other technique, but I think you need to do that technique instead of this technique in this berm. Um, and it's just understanding what does skills coaching actually look like from a technical perspective at that level, because it is a component that you can squeeze 2 or 3%, even 1% out of those elite World Cup riders. They're so focused on getting 0.5% from the bike, 0.5% from the nutrition or the mental training. And if you had that same approach to the technical coaching at that level, it would do dividends. It would pay off the same as like a brand new boxer that gets, what was 1.2% faster in this tiny section because of a new
yeah.
fork or whatever. Like it could be the same if you're just pressuring the bike differently, or you've got a different foot position through the corner or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, this is I love the perspective here. It really is like you're thinking about so many things, and there's so much that goes into the curriculum and everything that you created, how you think as a coach. And in looking at the things that you've created, do you feel like you need to be a bit of an artist, or are you a bit of an artist when you're coming up with these things, like from skills training all the way across to like, the logos and everything that you work on?
I love that you've asked that question. No one's ever asked me that question, and the short answer is yes. Like I am. I, I I do consider myself someone that's artistic. Um, because I love it. I didn't do art at GCSE because I saw how much coursework there was to do, but I've always loved art. Like I painted through university. I was always drawing in lectures instead of writing. I probably should have written more notes and done less drawing. Um, but I love art and I love creating things. I play music quite a bit. Um, I was really into photography for a while. Like most of the pictures in my house is my photography. This one's not. This is my friend. He's a really good photographer. Shout out to Tim Howard. Hashtag Tim Howard. Um, that's an inside joke. He'll get it. Um, but yeah, in short, yeah, I love outside of this sort of biking things. One of the things I'm happiest to do on my computer is design stuff. So whether it's like you say, I've done all the logos and branding for everything for ZEP, Donuts and Bikes, GSMBC, PMBIA back in the day. Yeah, I love that outlet. I've always, and really, I think it all goes to the same thing. It's creating something and putting it out there in the world. And, recently I've just redone the whole ZEP website. Originally I built the PMBI website for designed that for a long time, and then my buddy John Matlock, he built it, but it was a lot of sort of design from me, um and then recently the GSMBC website. So I do all the logos, all the websites, all the branding, and yeah, it's for me, it's in a way it's the same thing. I'm just thinking of something, um designing it, making it, and then putting it out there, and it's either like an arty thing or it's a technical coaching thing. But it's a nice balance, I think, because if you're always writing technical things, that can get pretty deep and intense, and it's nice to sometimes switch off and just spend an hour or two working on something lighter and more fun, which is the layout of the website or merchandise or branding or logo design or color palettes and
Yeah,
all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess it's sort of the yin to the yang in a way.
yeah, yeah. It's very interesting just to even hear about like how I think art sort of, or many domains influence like one specific domain of like, coaching and things that come out of it. And I myself, I would call myself a bit of a creative. I've, did a lot of marketing stuff, but used to produce music for years. Also kind of slotted into, now I'm more into the design stuff, and I've noticed that like, the pattern recognition and also design and like painting, and lately got into more like modern painting, which is like kind of, it's like way out there. It's like gone into like art galleries, and I can just sit there and stare at stuff for years. Actually, I even know this funny, like it's, how people will sometimes do that. I'll never understand art. Like that's a meme. It's a
Yeah,
meme that people are like, I'll never get art, or I'll never get fashion, but like I'll never understand modern art. And I remember going and
yes,
seeing one of these masterpieces, and it was just a black square. Like that was it. Like there was nothing else to it. And I was like, well, there's so many levels to this. But
yeah. That
yeah,
that
so
stuff I can't get behind. That stuff. That stuff. I'm like, if I feel like I could produce that work, I find a hard time appreciating it. It's like when you go to a restaurant and if you eat food, you're like, I could have cooked that easily. But if you go to a restaurant and you're literally like, I have no idea how they made this and it
right.
tastes phenomenal. Like, I love that. Like,
Well,
food's another part of it for me. Like, Shannon does most of the cooking. She's an amazing cook, but I do love cooking. And occasionally when I have the time and the bandwidth, I love to, but it's all the same thing. It's just creating. I think I'm just creative. I like to create stuff. And I don't know where that comes from, really. I mean, even growing up, like riding bikes with Dan was a really good artist, and he did a ton of artwork. And that always kind of, he was better at it than me. That always kind of inspired me as well. But it's funny how your childhood friends still kind of influence you. But
Well,
um,
this cross-dimensional thing that you have going, it's like super obvious, and like there's these ideas of like many dimensions that then lead to like what you end up doing with your life, and so having a lot of knowledge across. And so, Donuts and Bikes, obviously a very uniquely named podcast, but big influence of donuts here from the sounds of it. What percentage of the podcast is donuts, and what percentage is bikes?
well, it's like 99% mountain bike coaching.
Yes.
And then occasionally and then at the end of every episode, we have like a donut of the day.
Right.
Because Christian and I, we kind of thought about the podcast years ago when we were riding in North Carolina. It was a way for us to kind of connect with the coaching community. And we always felt like we were traveling to all these places running these instructor courses, but we wanted to sort of give them something between the courses or after the course, or if they can't get to a course. And we just felt like we had a lot more value to offer. And so starting that podcast was kind of cool because, I mean, I think really it was one of the first, probably the first podcast focused just on the coaching of mountain biking. And a way, it was just a way for us to sort of personalize it, make it fun, because both of us love donuts. And I don't understand people that don't like donuts. I have a hard time relating to
Yeah, I
them.
don't get it either. I love donuts.
So, but yeah, it was just something sort of fun to add to it. And I mean, we should have called the podcast something like Mountain Bike Coach, or I don't know, something more descriptive and sensible. But I don't know, we weren't really feeling that. So,
Well,
but yeah, technically it's Donuts and Bikes, the mountain bike coaching podcast. But I think
yeah.
everyone just calls it Donuts and Bikes.
I think that the differentiating is, this is a business pillar. Differentiating is easier than being the best or whatever. So by like the saying that like saying donuts and bikes is a little bit different, a little bit out there. But on the donut topic, all right, let's get serious with this one. Could you list me your top 3 favorite donuts in the world?
I can, yeah.
Maybe we should
Yeah.
go 5 in the list, but yeah, you could go as long as you want, but top 3
Yeah.
for sure.
My favorite was in Australia, and they did this foot long. It was just classic, like foot long donut with cream and raspberry jam in the middle. And it was
Okay.
like, those kind of places you go, like if you eat the whole donut, you get your plate on the, you get your name on the wall kind of thing. So it was one of those places, but I didn't finish it. I couldn't eat a foot long donut, but the donut itself was just one of those things I love about cooking is if you get good ingredients, you only need 3 or 4. It's like a margarita pizza in Italy. Like you get the best ingredients and you don't have too many of them. And usually that's better than all the fancy stuff. And that was the cream, the jam, everything was homemade.
Yeah.
The donut, that was still one of my top donuts of all time.
That's one.
That's one.
Could be one.
There's one in North Vancouver called I want to say Deadly Donuts, but I can't remember the name. I'm not very good at remembering names. I'm much better at remembering logos and pictures. Yeah. But they had this cinnamon roll donut. That thing's to die for. So good. And then there's a pina colada donut, which I'm a big fan of. It's kind of like a apple fritter, but pineapple and coconut.
Okay.
So it's sort of like a pina colada version of a apple fritter. So yeah. But I mean, last year we were joking because we finished season 4 of Donuts and Bikes just before Christmas, and we weren't very good with the donuts last year because I was trying to be healthier last year. I was riding a lot, and I was doing quite good on that front. But the downside was like we kept recording episodes and then realizing that, and Christian was kind of busy and on the same bandwagon. We kept realizing we didn't actually have a donut of the day. So we're going to try and do better this year and eat more donuts.
Yeah. So I wanted to give my 3 as well. So I have 3 that I've been thinking about, and I think about them all the time. So Number one comes from Portland. Not Voodoo Donuts. I know everyone's like Voodoo Donuts. They go nuts
They're
for those,
really good.
but
Yeah.
Blue Star Donuts. So
Mm.
kind of let's call it the ugly stepsister to Voodoo Donuts or ugly cousin kind of thing, but a little more subtle, under the radar. This is kind of will shape the way that I like donuts. I'm really simple and like sort of the
Mm.
ingredients, whatever. So a bit of a heavier donut. I think it was like a bergamot blueberry donut, but it was like an old fashioned style, just like glazed, but then like really subtle kind of. It was just like, you know, just hit the spot on so many levels. It was like
Yeah.
kind of savory. It was sweet. It was like there was just like things happening where I was like the taste on it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So number one, number two, it's probably I think this is like maybe a common classic for a lot of people, but you go to North Vancouver, you go to um, Honey's Donuts, and it's like
Mm.
a
Yeah.
heavy like dip.
That's really good.
Yeah, but it's also the kind of donut where you eat it in the morning and you probably get to skip lunch and dinner because it's like
Yeah.
so heavy. It's just sitting with
Yeah.
you. Like another kind of next level donut. And then I got kind of a bit of a wild card on my third. And this like there's a it's based out of Squamish, Fox and Oak. They make donuts.
Oh, yeah,
The
yeah.
reason the reason I call this a wild card is because it's more of like the light and fluffy kind of just
Mm.
different than a lot of the like donuts that people talk about really really loving. They have this one vanilla donut, and this is just simplicity thing for me where I would just like it's just off the charts with like it's simple, it's light, it's fluffy. I love it. So those are my top three. And maybe I'm
Yeah.
missing some, or like, we could do a deeper dive on the Donuts and Bikes podcast and like, we could do donuts first, 99% donuts, talk about it the whole day. But yeah,
Yeah.
like big fan of donuts. Stoked that, stoked that you had your three as well. And I love how confident you were in those.
Yeah.
Well, this is basically like how I wanted to wrap things up. Um, Fantastic to have you on the podcast. There's so much depth. There's so much in here. I really hope that really think that people are going to enjoy this one because it's just like it really is this peek behind the curtain into your mind of like how you come up with this curriculum and all the things you have going on. And like if there's so many things that people can take advantage of, I think right now, especially online, but like also in the instructor certification and like looking at getting coaching and with mountain biking, everything that's going on with GSMBC and ZEP and like, everything else. So thank you for being on the podcast. This is fantastic. And I'm sure we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It was a ton of fun. It was great. And stoked for Sports Sense. You guys are killing it.